Hello, and welcome to a special Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abu Ni'ma, and early this morning, Friday, June 13th, Israel launched massive air and missile strikes across Iran. An unprecedented assault, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed, was aimed at the country's nuclear facilities. The attacks targeted Iran's top military leadership, killing several senior officers, including Armed Forces Chief of Staff General Mohammad Baqeri and Chief Commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Major General Hossein Salami. Several senior scientists were also killed in the Israeli attack, which targeted residential neighborhoods as well as nuclear and military sites and left 78 people dead and almost 400 injured. Netanyahu stated that the attacks would continue, quote, for as many days as it takes. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, vowed that his country's armed forces would retaliate and warned that, quote, the Zionist regime has prepared a bitter and painful fate for itself. Israel claimed that Iran fired some 100 drones towards Israel in what appeared to be an initial response, and that Israel's Air Force was working to shoot them down. We wanted to take advantage of an opportunity to talk about these unfolding events with Dr. Mohammed Marandi live from Tehran. He is a professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran and a regional and geopolitical analyst. Welcome back to the Electronic Intifada, Dr. Marandi.
Thank you, Ali. It's always an honor being with you and your excellent colleagues, and it's I think it's appropriate for me to thank you for all the great work that you've done for the Palestinian people, all of you, and to expose what the United States and Israeli regimes and other regimes have been doing over the last 20 months.
Thank you. And we're so grateful you could join us at short notice amid these unfolding events to try to provide people with some analysis that counteracts the spin and propaganda that we're seeing in mainstream media. So let's just get straight into it so we don't take too much of your time tonight. First of all, just describe to us what you witnessed this morning in Tehran and what has happened and is happening across the country and the reactions of the people around you. Then we'll get into some of the analysis and what may happen next.
Well, I was awake at the time of the attack, and I heard the explosions, but others woke up as a result of the explosions. They were quite loud. They bombed apartment buildings in our neighborhood, as well as neighborhoods that are not far off. So many of the explosions were very loud. And in the morning, people went out and they were taking videos themselves, and some of the people who were trying to rescue people were taking their own videos, and we began to see similar scenes that we've been seeing in Lebanon and in Gaza. Of course, it was in a much greater scale in Gaza and in Lebanon, but children thrown out of buildings, apartment blocks being hit, and then children's bodies lying outside the buildings, and women being massacred. They murdered neighbors of their targets. They murdered the families of their targets, and they were completely ruthless. So the strikes on Tehran were strikes on the city itself, just like where you live, your neighborhood, 10, 20, 30, 40 homes down the road. It's just like that. I haven't been to any of these places, so I can't say much, but there's a lot of anger right now in Iran because the attack was unprovoked, but also because the Americans are effectively saying that we are supporting this. The French have basically said that the Israeli regime has the right to defend itself, so it has the right to carry out aggression against Iran. And the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency has refused to condemn the Israeli regime for striking Iranian nuclear sites. And you know that if there's radioactive leakage. That could be catastrophic. But for these tools of the Western Empire, anything goes. If it's when after Gaza, I don't think anyone is surprised anymore. But I think Iranians are particularly angry because of what they're seeing, what the statements made by Trump, the fact that children and women were targeted. There's a lot of misinformation, Ali, by the way, and a lot of these things that are being circulated online, a lot of them are fake. Some of them are true. The sites have been struck, radar installations have been struck, but Iran has many radar systems, and they have their own indigenous radar systems. And Iran's missile and drone capabilities are all deep underground. Its nuclear installations are deep underground, the key ones in particular, which haven't been touched. So it's a dark day, without a doubt. And I think it's clear that it was a mistake that these commanders and government officials were exposed. I think they probably thought that the Israelis would not wage war, because I think that the feeling was that the Israeli regime was going to attack. I know that the Iranians were waiting for an Israeli attack. But my guess is that they didn't think that they would actually target senior government officials or military officials, because that would be a sort of declaration of war. Obviously, we paid the price, but now all those commanders have been replaced, and they are regrouping. And I think that in the hours and days ahead, you're going to see major Iranian acts of retaliation.
Well, we'll get back to that question too. I know it's on a lot of minds, but I want to talk more. You mentioned the response of President Trump, and a few hours ago he posted the following on his Truth Social website, and I'm going to read what he said, and then I'm going to ask for your reaction. He said, "I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it with much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it's too late. God bless you all." So with that in mind, was Iran duped by the United States and Israel? Was it naive for Iran to go into negotiations with the United States? And in your opinion, was the apparent disagreement between the US and Israel over Iran policy a ruse to lull Iran into a false sense of security?
Well, the connection got bad. I understood what you said, but can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. It looks like we may be having difficulty with the connection. Let's see if we can get it back. All right, we'll see if we're able to fix the connection. And in the meantime, that tweet from Donald Trump, or that Truth Social post from Donald Trump, All right, we're just seeing if we can get it back.
Hello?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah, we hear you again now, Dr. Marandi.
Sorry about that. The connection's not very good. They slowed down the internet because of the ongoing situation. I heard the question, so I'll just respond if you hear me clearly.
We do.
Okay, I think a well-known critic of the JCPOA, and
That's the Iran nuclear agreement of 2015.
That's right. And I've always been critical of it, and but I'm not one of those people who was hostile towards the Foreign Minister Dr. Zarif or anything like that. I felt that there were problems with it, and I'm not really into any of these political factions, but I was critical of it. Now, all that aside, I think that Iran had to negotiate, and the reason was that it was, in my opinion, somewhat inevitable that there would be military conflict. But if Iran had not negotiated, the United States, the West, would have framed it as if Iran was hiding something and that Iran did not want a solution and that Iran wanted a military conflict. But by going to the negotiating table, the Iranians did show that they were willing to have a deal. The problem was that Trump was making demands that are in violation of Iran's sovereignty. It's like saying that Iran should give up a piece of its territory, or Iran should give up its resources or the ability to govern certain areas in the country. So the enrichment of uranium is a sovereign right, regardless of the fact that Iran has invested in it. Many people have been trained in this field, and also Iran is dependent on it. Iran uses its nuclear program for medicine, for industry, for agriculture, and also to be able to produce fuel so that if the Americans block Iran from having enriched uranium for its nuclear power plants, they could produce it itself. So this was something that was non-negotiable. But that does not mean that since Iran was negotiating, that Iran's military was on vacation, or that the Iranian state was looking the other way. They were at the same time preparing themselves for this situation. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that Iran is very much alone, Ali. Our region is controlled by the Americans. The resistance doesn't have many friends. Some of your viewers may support, or they may have in the past supported Turkey or Qatar. They watch Al Jazeera and they think that they're sympathetic towards the cause. They're not. They are in the American camp. And as we speak, the bases that the United States has in Qatar, in Turkey, in the Emirates, in Bahrain, and elsewhere, they're being used to help Israel, both to defend itself and in order to, and also when the regime wants to carry out attacks on Iran. Jordan, of course, is completely open to whatever needs the Americans and others have. So Iran is very much alone. It has friends across the globe, across the global south. It has good relations with Russia, with China, with BRICS countries. But the fact is that Iran is the only country, along with Yemen, that is serious about Palestinian rights. I mean, there are groups like Hezbollah and others, but the only two governments, because Yemen is a government, the Ansarullah and the government in Sana'a, they support the Palestinian people and they've sacrificed for them. And the truth is, Ali, that these attacks on Iran have nothing to do with the nuclear program. They have nothing to do with, I don't know, terrorism or human rights or global warming or anything. They have to do with Palestine. They have to do with Iran's position on Palestine. Otherwise, the United States has no problem with any of the countries in this region. So the United States uses everything as an excuse to target Iran, to sanction Iran, to hurt Iran. And you also have some people who are either on the payroll of oil and gas-rich regimes in the Persian Gulf, or who are just, I don't know, deeply sectarian, that say Iran does nothing for the Palestinians. If Iran did nothing, then why is Iran under assault? Iran has been supporting the Palestinians. Iran has been supporting the axis of resistance for decades, and it continues to do so. The heroism of the resistance in Gaza is, of course, phenomenal, but the fact is that they're getting supplies somehow, and in some way, and someone is paying for it. There's no doubt about any of that. So Iran has always been in a tough position, and one should not imagine that this is a level playing field. They carried out a surprise assault on Iran. The Iranians were waiting for an assault, but still it would be a surprise because they don't know the hour or the means or how it's going to be done. So ultimately, Iran now has to regroup, and the military has to prepare itself. Intelligence has to make sure that the enemy is not able to infiltrate inside the country. And I think in the hours ahead, we're going to see an offensive posture. The Iranians will start striking. Now, Iranian assets, drone and missile assets, really haven't been touched. And there are two types of assets. There are long-range drones and missiles that are for the Israeli regime, and they're in many underground bases. And then there are many underground bases with shorter-range drones and missiles that are for the Persian Gulf region. So if the United States, if Trump is foolish enough to engage in conflict, then I think those regimes that host U.S. bases will be complicit, those family dictatorships, and they will collapse very swiftly. And targeting them is infinitely easier. American bases or assets in the region, or those who are allied with Americans, or those who are complicit, they will be easily targeted because it's very short range and very easy to access. Anyone who looks at the map of the Persian Gulf would see that Iran controls one side of the Persian Gulf. It's not very wide, and Iran has huge quantities of missiles for drones. So the smart thing would be for the United States to stay out, but Trump is increasingly exposing the role he's played, or the role he intends to play, and that I think is would be if he pushes, that would be catastrophic for the world. But in any case, I think that the Iranian response to the Israeli regime will be coming shortly, and that it will be severe. But war is war. And again, it's basically Iran against NATO. And NATO is supporting this genocidal, monstrous regime, at this ethno-supremacist regime. And Iran's sin is that it's opposed to ethno-supremacism in Palestine. That's Iran's sin. And then regional countries, whether it's Erdogan, who does trade and business with Netanyahu after 20 months of genocide, or anyone else in the region, they are assisting the Israeli regime. At best, they're not helping, but many of them, through the assets that the United States have on their territory, they're assisting the United States. Syrian airspace, Iraqi airspace is being used by the Israelis, by the Americans, against Iran as well.
Let's talk about Iran's deterrence and Iran's response. Iran has carried out two, what it calls True Promise operations, True Promise 1 and True Promise 2. True Promise 1 was in April last year, and it was a limited missile strike on Israeli military and intelligence targets. And True Promise 2, which was on October 1st last year, was a much larger operation with hundreds of ballistic missiles, many of which, if not most of which, hit their targets in Israel. There was video proof of that. I actually saw that operation with my own eyes from Jordan. It was clearly visible in the sky. Those operations were intended to be deterrent, and Iran had said very clearly that if Israel attacked again, it would retaliate massively with a much bigger missile strike. Presumably, Iran has what's thought to be the world's largest arsenal of ballistic missiles, or at least perhaps outside, the major superpowers. Clearly, that deterrence didn't work. What I mean, I'm putting the hard questions to you because these are the questions people are asking. The deterrence didn't work. Israel went ahead with this strike, not only bombing military sites, but targeting Iran's most senior military leadership. What do you make of all that?
Well, the True Promise 1, I think, was mostly an intelligence gathering operation about Israeli defenses. And True Promise 2, where I think 180, 190 missiles were fired, I think was a test for Iranian missiles mostly. So I'm to a degree I'm speculating, but True Promise 1 I think was more about intelligence gathering to see what the Israelis, the Americans have as air defense and so on, and it was mostly drones, very cheap drones that sort of draw out their defense capabilities. And True Promise 2 they use serious weapons, but they wanted to test their accuracy. Now, there are the debates about how what sort of damage was caused, but I think after True Promise 2 and after the Israeli attack on Iran, which happened afterwards, after True Promise 2, the Iranians they decided that if they're going to escalate, if there's going to be an escalation, the chances are that the Americans will get involved. And so Iran has to work on the accuracy of their missiles and their drones, but also they have to increase their underground bases, and they have to be prepared for a potential American involvement in this conflict. And that is something that the Iranians were doing over the last 6 months. I think the Iranians believe that military conflict would be inevitable, and ultimately the empire, the Americans, the Israelis would attack Iran. And Netanyahu needs escalation to survive. That is the reason why people like myself, and perhaps you as well, I don't know, but in Iran, I was always saying that the Israeli regime will expand the war on Lebanon, because I believe that Netanyahu needed the war. I don't think it was a victory for the Israelis. I don't think any of this is in the long run good for the Israeli regime. I think they're overstretched, and I think they delegitimize it themselves, and I think the assault on Tehran just further creates hatred for the regime, despite the attempts of Western governments and Western media to support and justify them. But I think the Iranians felt that they needed time to prepare themselves for something much bigger. And that's what they have been doing over the last 6 months. So as the negotiations have been taking place, the Iranians have been beefing up and strengthening their underground assets. They've been increasing the protection for their nuclear program, which is a peaceful program. And we always have to remember that it's been for the last 30 years, Netanyahu has been saying it's 1 year away, 2 years away, but Western media won't tell you this. They will they will repeat the narrative in order to justify Netanyahu, just like they did throughout the last 20 months. Just like when they were bombing hospitals, they were pretending that it was the resistance that bombed the hospitals until it became so obvious, and when they started killing kids, infants in incubators, they just moved on. So I think the Western narrative won't have the impact that it did in the past. I think that the world has changed. But in any case, it's still early. I think we have to wait and see what's going to happen. Things don't look pretty right now, but we have to keep in mind that the internet is basically controlled by the West. The social media is controlled by the West. A lot of these images are AI. There are a couple in particular that are AI. Or, for example, one of the places that was struck allegedly was a city where a friend of mine is, and I called him, and he said nothing happened here, and it's not a big city. So it's not a good situation. It's war, but let's give the Iranians some time. And at the end of the day, Ali, Iran is the only hope. Everyone should be supporting Iran. Iran is the only moral actor here, along with Yemen in the international community. And those who try to attack Iran, and some of them are sectarian, some of them racial, some of them just have a very old hatred towards Iran. They should, I think many of them are trying to cover up for their own inaction, the inaction of their own governments. Just like what happened in Syria when, since 2011, they use sectarianism to try to create a divide, and they try to claim that the resistance was being sectarian in Syria, but the reality was that it was a NATO dirty war that regional regimes were part of. And I think history has vindicated the resistance in Iran. After all, the whole resistance is about defending the Palestinian people, which are overwhelmingly Sunni. And even when parts of Hamas initially, they were fooled, some of them, especially in the political wing, by the narratives of the West and these Arab oil and gas-rich dictatorships bound to the West on Syria, Iran continued to support them and the resistance. Iran ignored the divisions that the West and its regional allies were creating and continued to support the resistance. So Iran was supporting Palestine during these 4.5 decades when no one else was. Qatar never supports them. Qatar may build a couple of hospitals or give money or for scholarships for the children of certain officials, or Turkey may do something, or you may have Palestinians working in different Arab countries, but no one supports the resistance, and no one has been supporting the resistance except for Iran over these decades. And the sacrifices made by Ansarullah, Hezbollah, and the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces and the Iranians, it's clear. So if Iran wanted to be sectarian, right now there's another sound, another explosion. So if Iran wanted to be sectarian, why would Iran even support the Palestinian cause? Iran could do a deal with the Americans and get it over with. The Americans have imposed no sanctions on Turkey, on Saudi Arabia, on Egypt, on Jordan, on the Emirates, or any other country. It's targeting Iran. It's sanctioning Iran. And it's obvious why they're doing that. It's because Iran is supporting the Palestinian people, and it has been doing so sincerely for a very long time, despite the attempts to discredit Iran, to dehumanize Iran, to present Iran as a dictatorship or whatever it is that whatever. And that is something that Arab media does all the time. And it's not.
We are, seems like the connection is hung up again, and we will try and work and get Dr. Marandi back. I'm keeping an eye on some of the comments and questions that people are posting in the comments. So if you have questions for Dr. Marandi, I will try and put some of them to him when hopefully we get him back. So do that. I know I still have some questions I want to ask him, and we'll try and get the connection back up. I hope that the loss of the connection wasn't related to the explosion he said that he heard, and I hope that he is safe. Earlier today on Sky News, he talked about the proximity of the attacks in his neighborhood, and so clearly there is real danger there. Good, we have you back, Dr. Marandi. So,
Ali, was I speaking to myself this whole time?
No, you were not. We were hearing you just fine. You cut out. We lost you for about a minute, and now we have you back. So all is good. So, Dr. Marandi, you talked about the regime change war in Syria, or the dirty war in Syria, and it got me thinking about the famous comments of General Wesley Clark, senior U.S. commander, back in 2003. He said that, around the time of 9/11, he was briefed by another Pentagon official that there was a plan for a U.S. war plan for regime change focused on 7 countries, including Iraq, Syria, or beginning with Iraq, then Syria, then Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off with Iran. Well, we can count down that list and see how many they've done. They did Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. The regime change efforts are ongoing. Libya, of course, Barack Obama invaded Libya, Somalia, and Sudan as well. So is this... You already said that this is about Iran's support for Palestine. That may be the bigger motive, and you said the nuclear issue is a pretext, but is this really an attempted regime change operation?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. That has been the objective for decades. That's why they supported Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. That's why they've been imposing sanctions on Iran and increasing them until Obama imposed the maximum pressure sanctions, and then Trump reimposed those maximum pressure sanctions, and Biden left them in place. That's what it's been all about. They want to get rid of Iran because if they can get rid of Iran, then there is really no more resistance against the Israeli regime. You have no doubt that there's none of the countries, those countries that have embassies, or those countries that do business or send oil, they're not enemies of Netanyahu. And they've been doing it during this Holocaust. So it's basically Iran. And Syria was because their opposition to Syria was because it was opposed to Israel. So it doesn't matter what sort of government it is. The point is that they needed to undermine Syria, Lebanon, Libya, and all these countries, but most importantly, Iran, in order to devastate the region so that the Zionist regime can rule supreme. That is the objective.
Dr. Marandi, I want to read you the statement issued by the German Foreign Ministry. I don't know if you've already seen it, but it's really quite remarkable. Sorry?
I can guess.
Well,
I'm pretty sure what it says.
Well, let me read it to you. The situation in the Middle East has escalated dramatically overnight. Israel has carried out targeted strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran is responding with hundreds of drone attacks on Israel. This development is more than alarming. We strongly condemn the indiscriminate Iranian attack on Israeli territory. Iran's nuclear program violates the Non-Proliferation Treaty and poses a threat to the entire region, especially to Israel. Israel has the right to defend its existence and the security of its citizens. At the same time, we call on all parties to avoid further escalation. What do you make of that? Germany has strongly condemned Iran for its indiscriminate aggression against Israel. Are we living on the same planet as the Germans?
No, we are not living on the same planet. They obviously they're from somewhere else. But first, I have to point out that Iran has not fired any drones at the Israeli regime yet, and that was just media manufacturing Just like the drone attacks on Iran. A lot of this is just propaganda, but Iran hasn't yet responded. It is preparing its response, but it hasn't.
So you're saying those reports because, just to be clear, the Israelis said that Iran fired 100 drones. There was video circulating of the Shahid drones buzzing reportedly over Iraq. The Jordanian Air Force says that it intercepted drones over Jordanian territory. Are you saying none of that happened?
No, no drones were fired from Iran. It is possible that a handful of drones were launched by Iraq, by the resistance in Iraq. That is possible. But Iran hasn't launched any drones. And Ali, as I said, there's a lot of misinformation, and a lot of the footage is just footage, and they say that, like, look at this vehicle, or this building, and how it's been destroyed. And some of it's true, some of it's true, some of it's just and some of it is AI. So no, Iran hasn't fired any drones. But the point is that the Israeli regime launched this assault, and not Iran. And Iran is not in violation of the rules and regulations of the NPT or the IAEA. Not at all. Iran is well within its rights to do what it is doing right now. Iran is not abiding by the nuclear deal, the JCPOA, which was signed between Iran and the permanent members of the UN Security Council in Germany. But that's because the Americans left the deal and the Europeans discontinued its implementation. But what Iran is doing in its nuclear installations, all of them are legal in accordance with international law. If Iran wants to enrich uranium at higher degrees than 60%, it is legal. It can do that. So what the Germans are saying is just complete dishonesty. This was a war that was initiated by the Israeli regime. They murdered civilians. The Iranians have yet to respond, and no Israeli civilians have been killed. But even if they are, it would be retaliation. But so far, nothing has happened. And Iran's nuclear program is completely legal. There are no regulations. Iran is within its right to enrich uranium. It's within its right to enrich uranium at whatever degree it wants, as long as it's not for military purposes. The IAEA board is politicized, and most of those countries that voted against Iran were Western countries, and their presence on the board is disproportionate. And then all they have to do is pressure a few small countries to join them, and they get the majority. Otherwise, most of those countries that were supporting Iran or who abstained, they are population-wise the vast majority of humanity. They represent the vast majority of humanity in the global south.
A question that I'm getting that I've seen a lot of people asking is, and I've heard you speak about it previously, not necessarily today, but is the question of Iranian air defenses. Do you know, or have there been reports in Iran about whether these attacks were carried out from over Iranian territory? In other words, are the Israeli aircraft penetrating Iranian airspace, or are they firing from outside Iranian airspace? Or is that unknown at this point?
No, they're firing from Iraq. There are no Israeli jets. Even in some Telegram channels, they showed a drone over an Iranian city, Tabriz, in the northwest, and they said it's an Israeli drone. That was an Iranian drone over the city. No, the Israeli fighters are launching missiles. They fly over Jordan. They fly over Syria. They fly over Iraq. And from Iraqi airspace, roughly 100 kilometers away from the border, I'm not sure exactly how far, they fire their missiles.
they claim that they have, and I'm not expecting you to give away any military secrets, and I know that you don't necessarily have access to those, but the Israelis claim that they also claim this back after True Promise 2, I believe it was. They claim to have severely destroyed or severely damaged or destroyed Iranian air defenses. That is difficult to assess, maybe without knowing at this point, but that's a claim the Israelis have made. We have a few minutes left. I guess I want to ask you, I have two more questions for you, really. What do you think Iran's response will be? I know that you're not being handed military secrets, but you are a careful student and analyst of Iran. What can we expect? I know that events are unfolding, and many people in the region are worried about how much this Israeli initiated war could escalate. What are you expecting could happen? What are the scenarios you're looking at in the next hours, days, weeks? And what might people be looking at?
I think Iran will start striking at Israel with missiles and possibly drones. And then the question arises, what does the United States do? If then the United States enters the battle, then I think that would be the end of the global economy. Very simple. But I think that Iran is going to start hitting back, and the Israelis will continue until this ends somehow. I don't know when this will end and how this will end, but I know that the Iranians are going to hit the Israelis back hard.
And again, these events are still unfolding, but what, if anything, can you say about how you see the regional and global impact of what has happened today or what has started today? What reactions are you seeing from around the world, especially from global powers such as China and Russia? And what kind of support can Iran expect from China and Russia?
Well, I think everyone is concerned about how the United States has gone mad, really, and that how the West is collectively supporting the Israeli regime no matter what it does, whether it's genocide or Holocaust in Gaza, whether it's genocidal strikes in Lebanon, whether it's daily killings in the West Bank or in Lebanon, whether it's the bombings of Syria, or now waging war against Iran. Whatever the Israeli regime does, whatever this ethno-supremacist regime does, the West supports it. And I think that has raised a lot of fears, even beyond the region. But at the end of the day, Ali, Iran is a sovereign and independent country, and Iran does not rely on other countries for its defense. We were very much alone when the United States armed Saddam Hussein, and so did the Soviet Union. They supported and armed him, gave him chemical weapons to fight against Iran, to launch a war against Iran. We were on our own. The West gave, and Germany in particular, gave him chemical weapons and prevented us from purchasing gas masks. They were trying to prevent us from being able to defend ourselves against chemical weapons. That's what the West was doing. So we struggled, we fought, we resisted, and we survived. And I have no doubt that Iran will not be defeated by the Israeli regime and the United States and this coalition of regimes, European regimes, and those in the region that are complicit in one way or form.
Back to the United States for a moment. In his statements, Donald Trump has said that he thinks that, the way he's expressing himself seems to think that attacking Iran in this way will get it to change its negotiating position and make an agreement that is more favorable to the United States and presumably Israel. And there have been many other voices in Israel, voices in the United States, members of Congress, for example, who've voiced the same opinion that if you hit Iran hard enough, they will come to their senses and they will make an agreement on American and Israeli terms. How likely do you think that is? And you already expressed skepticism. You said you're a skeptic about the previous nuclear agreement, the 2015 agreement, which Donald Trump tore up in his first term. I mean, is it far-fetched even to talk about making agreements and negotiations with a country like the United States that changes position from administration to administration, if not from week to week and from day to day, and which has repeatedly violated agreements? Of course, the agreement with Iran is one major example, and the Gaza ceasefire agreement, which Trump's envoy himself negotiated in January, and then the Trump administration turned around and tore it up. Is negotiation even an option? And then another question we're seeing is, or a comment I see often is, would any of this have happened if Iran had just gone ahead and built a nuclear weapon? If you're dealing with states that can't be deterred or can't be reasoned with, people say, look at North Korea, they have nuclear weapons and no one bothers them now. Wouldn't a nuclear deterrent be the answer to Iran's insecurity? That's a statement I see. I'm not necessarily endorsing it, but I'm putting it to you for your reaction.
Yeah, I mean, that is an ongoing debate in Iran. And I think with what's happening now, the United States and the Israeli regime are pushing Iran in the direction where increasingly people will demand that Iran changes its nuclear doctrine. And I think probably the majority now would support that after what's happened, because it was 50-50 until before this new chapter in the conflict. The Iranians never wanted chemical weapons. During the war, senior officials asked the leader, Imam Khomeini, back then, to allow them to produce chemical weapons, and he said no. And he said, and that is the same reason why Iran does not produce nuclear weapons. Iran, the leader, believes that it's an inhumane weapon. But there's also a second reason, and that is that if Iran produces a nuclear weapon, then neighboring countries in Central Asia, the Caucasus, West Asia, they would want to produce nuclear weapons too, and that would create further instability. So there's a logic behind not producing nuclear weapons, and the Iranians have not pursued it. They could have had nuclear weapons a long time ago if they wanted. But if this continues, then if they attack our nuclear sites, and then Iran's nuclear doctrine will change. The second point is that yes, dealing with Trump is I think pretty useless. The United States constantly shifts its position. It's always done that, but under Trump, it's become extraordinary. It's not just Gaza and the ceasefire; it's the trade war, it's Ukraine, it's everything. And so the United States is completely untrustworthy, and it supports a genocidal regime. The United States is just as genocidal as the Israeli regime. The Israeli regime has a ceasefire now with Lebanon. The United States and Western countries are guarantors, but the regime is carrying out murders on a daily basis. So in Gaza, in Lebanon, with China, with Russia, with Iran, the United States has always been completely unreliable, and that makes negotiating almost impossible, negotiating a deal. And if somehow you do have a deal, you will never know if you will wake up one morning and Trump will have posted something on Truth Social and have undermined whatever deal it is that you had with the United States.
Well, we're coming to the end of the time that you generously allotted for us, Dr. Marandi. Is there anything else you want to point out before we sign off?
No, I just again want to thank you and your colleagues for your excellent work, and while the focus should be on Iran right now, but not at the expense of what's happening in Gaza. Every day they're killing children. Every day they're killing women. Every day they're killing civilians. People are starving, and we should not be distracted away from that. We can focus on the crimes being committed against Iran, against Lebanon, against the people in the West Bank, and the genocide and Holocaust being carried out in Gaza. We can focus on all of them simultaneously. And so let's not get distracted from one because of another.
That's very well said. And it's been particularly distressing that all this is happening as communications have been almost totally cut off with Gaza. And it's very difficult to see what is happening there. And no doubt the horrific atrocities are continuing. And that's something you often draw attention to. And Dr. Marandi, I'm grateful for your time. I know our viewers and listeners are too, especially with these unfolding events. We were very glad we could grab you to get your perspective. We wish you and everyone else in Iran safety, and that the horror which Israel is spreading around the region will end as soon as possible. Thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure and an enormous learning experience to have you, and we hope to have you back again before too long.
Thank you very much for having me. Always an honor, always a pleasure.
Thank you. And of course, that was Dr. Mohammed Marandi. He is a professor of English literature at the University of Tehran and also a very well-known geopolitical analyst. You can find his analysis on his X or Twitter account, and he often goes up against Western media. He gave an interview on Sky News earlier today that you can find online, and was really quite remarkable the way he hit back at some of the talking points that were being put to him. And we had the opportunity to get him at short notice, and we put together this impromptu special live stream, and I'm grateful to everyone who was able to watch. I'm grateful to Tamara Nassar for helping produce, Ellie Gerzon, Michael Brown, and of course to everyone who's watching. If you watched the regular live stream yesterday, when we were here with our colleagues Nora Barrows-Friedman and Aswin Stanley and John Elmer, you would have heard that we are off for the next 2 weeks. So there is no regular live stream the next 2 Thursdays, but we will be back with the regular program on July 3rd. And in the meantime, of course, you can get a lot of news and analysis on the Electronic Intifada website at electronicintifada.net. You can sign up for our email list. You can read all the features from our writers in Gaza. It's more important than ever to keep attention on them, and other analysis from our writers around the world. And of course, on our YouTube channel and other platforms, we are going to be having new material coming up in the next few days and over the next 2 weeks, even though the live stream is off. So I hope we will see you there, and we will see you back on the regular live stream on July 3rd. But of course, we will continue to follow the unfolding events in the region. So that's it for today. Thank you again to everyone for all your support, and we will see you soon.